Stupid. Well, this is the game I'm gonna have for this conversation. Welcome everybody. For folks who do know me and don't know me, I'm Rajon. I'm probably one of your coworkers or previous coworkers at Undead Labs. I'm on the UI team, but I kind of keep to myself because just a lot going on and a lot to do. But otherwise, I'm just here to help and happy to talk about some of the stuff I do outside of the lab, focused on building a co-op, most notably working with my team over at Soft Not Week, where we kind of sat down about 4.5, goodness, going on 5 years ago, coming together and wanting to do video games a little bit differently. And I'm mostly here to kind of talk a little bit about some of the steps that we went through, especially trying to establish a co-op in the US. I think that is the most biggest context I want to give about this conversation today. This is not about building co-ops in other countries. This is about building a co-op studio in America specifically, because that's the only thing I've got history with. But I know some other folks who have done co-ops in Canada, most notably co-op with a K. Those are homies, and they have a little bit of a different processes and in regards to building up their business structure. But we can get into the nitty gritty there. That's kind of like an overview for what we're going to talk about today. But the other part of this conversation is really just for the folks here who have open questions and curiosities about running a co-op, building a co-op, starting a co-op, or anything else related to co-ops, maybe even co-op games. But we're here to just have an open discussion about what that looks like. Um, so yeah, I can yap a lot, but don't be afraid to like raise your hand, stop me, or just be like, "Hey, could you like elaborate on that a little bit?" Like this is just an open conversation. So there's really not really any structure to this today. Beyond just like the first half of running through kind of the story of Soft Not Week, and the other half being um anything y'all want to bring to the table. I guess before I start yapping, any curiosities, any questions, anything y'all absolutely want to hear from me?
I guess just insights about how the launch went.
Mhm.
I know
Oh
that you
boy,
were
yeah.
really busy for a while.
Yeah, that was an 8 month grind for sure. Okay, so yeah, I guess a little bit of history about Soft on Week and then rolling into like our first product together. Soft on Week was originally co-founded by three people, Alex and Morgan and Ella, from which I was initially hired in the first or second month of their formation as a contractor to be lead UI UX on their debut title, Spirit Swap Lo-Fi Beats Mastery 2. Due to my contributions and just how much work I was doing and putting into the project, within about 2 or 3 months of me collaborating with them, they were like, "Hey, we would love for you to join the co-op. Here's what that looks like." So for context, Soft Not Week, at the time that we ran the business, we paid our contractors $40 an hour, which is above, you could call it indie industry rate. Folks were usually getting around, I want to say, a ballpark of 20, maybe even less than 30 an hour. This is 2020, by the way. So a lot of people were suffering and struggling and dealing with the pandemic and lockdown and having trouble finding work. And since all of us on the team are people that are not only artists and creatives, but also people that love art, we just saw an opportunity to really just do video games the way we kind of wanted to. And a lot of this really starts from the connected ethos of like starting with a co-op and a co-op vision. A co-op, for those who are not familiar, because I don't want to just say jargon, is essentially a business structure or a business ethos where all the workers and people that collaborate on any labor performed at a studio company or whatever, essentially over a specific amount of time or a specific amount of labor performed, then have the opportunity to join that company and gain, let's call it profit based on the shared amount through the company, that whatever products or services they provide will then be shared out instead of being hired, being a contractor, and then getting paid hourly. Trying to think if there's anything there to elaborate on. Yes. So there's something I said there about like co-op as a business structure versus co-op as an ethos. Um, we in the US have all these corporate structures like LLCs, so proprietorships, S Corp, C Corp, etc. We also have co-ops as a business structure, but they are in America, we gotta love it, loves to make it incredibly difficult to do good things. This includes running a co-op. So we started out the company as an LLC, a partnership LLC, where each member basically got a certain percentage. Yes, Boom America, let's go. You could keep that on the record. Um, so we started off as a partnership LLC, where there were four of us. We split that between each member, and then we weren't making any profits. We were just making the game and putting money into making the game. So there's not really much profit that we got except from grants or collaborations. Like a lot of grants, like the Humble Grant, diversity grants. We initially started with a co-developer that gave us a loan. We paid that loan back during Kickstarter, but I can get into financials and how that all splits off because there's stuff I'm still learning today about it too. But in the grand scheme of things, when it came to us being like, okay, well, we want to be a co-op, but we officially want to be a co-op, we started talking with very specific lawyers that help you basically open a co-op or set up your company as a co-op structure in America. However, lawyers are expensive, and so is trying to open a co-op. We were basically looking at just to say that we were as a corporate entity in America around ten to $15,000 just to say we're officially a co-op recognized by the United States. And we sat down and said, okay, that's 15K for some paperwork versus 15K that we could be putting into the game. Naturally, we decided to put that money into the game because what we ultimately decided on was okay, if America and its legislature is going to make it really hard for us to do the right thing without us being rich, which none of us are, we're all working multiple jobs. Um, how do we just continue to be a co-op? And a lot of that is in regards to the second part of this, which is through the ethos of the company. We sat down and established what we call bylaws. And these bylaws are something that would exist whether we were a corporate co op or not. But they essentially are a written, you could call it Rosetta Stone on everything that we as a company will do in regards to how we run business, how we handle disputes with each other, how much time we would allow our contractors to then have the ability to become members of the co-op. Um, and just like the not just essay ethos, but that's a great word, really just the culture and the actual business practices of what we're going to do. This isn't like a soft, we're going to be kind to each other. We're naturally going to want to be kind to each other. We're going to be working with each other. But we make sure to write that into our bylaws and we all sign them. Every member signs the bylaws. I wish I had an example of our bylaws on me. I don't right now, but I can post an example later. But a lot of it is really like, oh, if somebody has provided a certain percentage of input into working on a project with us, we will then allow them membership clearance. This all sounds well and good because we've reached a really weird point in a video game co-op where it's like, okay, we finished the game. We launched Spirit Swap in February. It didn't exactly do gangbusters, and we're still working on trying to get our money back for what we spent to develop it. But the other question became, what justice would we be doing by inviting people into our co-op right now? Like, would we be setting these people up for success? Are we offering them employment, which technically we weren't? Like, what is the and this is not way this is really more so practically approaching what it means to run a co-op, right? Like you have a responsibility not only to the members but also to the workers. And if you're going to invite workers into your co-op, you don't want to just do that with the promise of profits if there's no profits to give in the first place. Um, so there's a little bit of like the reality of we need money to live, and we all got to, but also each member and each worker, regardless of who they are, has a different circumstance going on in their life. So there is a weird, and this isn't really tied to co-ops, this is more so tied to general labor at a company where different companies will require you to have a very specific kind of lifestyle to live there. And if everybody is trying to come to an indie studio with a dream and a vision, which is fantastic, and the enthusiasm and the passion, the other half of this is also being able to realistically and sustainably provide a means for folks to do their best work. So for us, when it came to developing Spirit Swap, being a co-op was really just like us starting to test the work waters with that. We believed in the bylaws. We believed in this way of work. Um, but we also believed in, regardless of whether somebody was a member or not, they will get paid properly and we will be responsible for that. And that's kind of where the $40 an hour came in, where we all sat down and said, okay, what is a fair amount? Like regardless of whatever your role is, engineer, artist, or what, or QA, or whoever, like regardless of that role, this is what we will pay you. There wasn't really a change in pay scale where engineers getting paid more than and XYZ. Everybody got paid the same amount. So we were able to raise tides for folks that were so used to, we have a lot of folks coming in. We worked with a lot of juniors too that were like, oh, I'll be happy with $15 an hour. And it's like, sweetie, we're not paying you minimum wage here. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not going to do that. If we wouldn't accept it, why would we give that to you? Is kind of a lot of where our ethos and stance on it came from. Now, of course, $40 an hour is expensive, but we are, I hate to use business speech here, but like we're investing in people to for the sake of their craft, right? Like it's not really like we want to pay you the most so you do the best. Like ultimately at the end of the day, the goal is for anybody working or collaborating with us or myself, is to have fun. If you're not having fun and you're having a bad day, that's okay. We'll take it a day at a time. But like everybody makes the best work when they're able to not have to think about what they're eating tomorrow. Let's see. Kay asks, did you have any cases where changes were made where someone's needs were greater? Absolutely. So certain folks that we worked with folks in different countries, right? Like we've worked with some of our artists were located in Japan. Certain folks, like the cost of living around the world is different too, because we're all working remotely, especially during lockdown. So certain folks living down south may have a somewhat smaller cost of living compared to somebody here in Washington. So that's really where that situation cropped up the most, is like the person, you never know who you're going to work with and where they're going to be living and what their active cost of living is going to be. So a lot of that's really like the most frequent occasion where something came up, but there's also certain scenarios where somebody's like, dude, I'm like missing rent and I just need this right now. And we were like, okay, we'll pay you in advance, right? Like, no problem. Like we always put the workers first. And sometimes that worked out and sometimes it didn't, but at least we still tried our best. So hopefully that answers your question, Kay. Is there anything more you wanted from that? They're typing for anybody who's on a record. Okay, super. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So and a lot of this really ties into why our base rate is our base rate. Like $40 an hour to somebody living in Florida is a shit ton of money. Compared to somebody who is living in LA where $40 an hour is just enough, or San Francisco where like living in these areas, or even see it correct. So even Seattle, like the cost of living in certain places are so drastically different in just in our country alone, that like we had to make sure we paid at least a rate that was somewhat typical and respectful of people's time and their craft and their effort, regardless of whatever their level is. Like you could be a senior, you're getting $40 an hour. You could be a junior, you're getting $40 an hour. That, and a lot of it just really ties into our budget, right? Like this is what we want to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we can at least try to do sustainably. The outcome of that reality for us as a company, the largest expense is our contractors. And the reality for the members of the studio is that we haven't paid ourselves at all yet. Most, if not all, of our like coworkers have been coworkers. They're also our coworkers, but they've all been paid ahead of time. And some folks needed gear. We purchased gear for them and computers and whatnot. So really, just meeting people where they are and what they need. Let's see. How does Soft Week handle inflation year over year? That is a great question. We haven't actually had to run into solving that problem, mostly because we already pay at a significantly higher rate. But it's also just like us trying to pay at a rate that is sustainable for us as a studio. Um, we try to meet everybody that we work with, depending on whatever their needs are. So some folks might need a little bit more, depending on whatever their scenario is, and we'll meet them there. So like $40 is the least that we pay some people. Um, Not really for the record or whatever, but some people got paid $80 an hour just because like the situation they were in, we really wanted to work with them. And this allowed people to do their best work, which I think shines in the game that we put out today. So it's a case by case basis, Zoe. Also, welcome, Simone. Welcome.
Yeah, hey, sorry. I got back really late from errands, so yeah, I feel like I must have missed so much greatness.
Nah, nah, not at all. We're kind of this is an open discussion. I'm kind of just
Mm.
running through the story, but as Kay mentioned, we're running through notes and recording. So if you ever want to jump back and see everything I yapped about earlier, you're not missing much.
All right, no, awesome. Um, yeah, I guess could I ask just so I could like catch up with the where you are at the
Mhm.
conversation? What was the context of what were you answering or
Absolutely.
yeah?
So in the chat, we got two questions, one from Kay. The first one being, did you have any cases where changes were made where someone's needs were greater? The answer was yes, mostly in regards to having contractors on the project that lived in different areas of the country and the world, where the cost of living for where they are can be significantly different, right? Like somebody living in Seattle will have a higher cost of living compared to somebody living in, say, Charlotte, North Carolina, or in Texas or wherever they might be. The cost of living is just going to be different in the same country, let alone people that we collaborate with around the world. Um, but also, people just have different life circumstances, and then we try to talk with them and meet them in the middle. And if we have the funds to provide more, then we can. But our base rate for paying our contractors is $40 an hour, no less, regardless of level and regardless of seniority, and regardless of role. $40 is what we could sustainably and realistically pay to each person at the minimum for the project, at least for what we budgeted. And then the second question from Zoe was, how does Soft Week handle inflation year over year? The TLDR is that we don't, because we are also all working multiple jobs and a lot of us getting paid and then our pay going into the project and then that paying people over time. And I can't say we've been around long enough to really identify handling inflation, but because our base rate is so significantly higher than most other studios in the industry, at least from an indie level, we end up beating out inflation. We stay ahead of it because we're already paying so much more right now. But that may change, right? Like it's very much just trying to take into consideration where we are and being present and then seeing what we need for the year and seeing what we need for time. So hopefully that catches you up. But otherwise, the only other thing that we yapped about was just like opening a co-op. What that means, there's kind of like two standards to that, where the first half is opening a co-op as a legal entity recognized by the United States. Which is super, 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 super expensive. And of course, America loves to make this hard for everybody that is not rich. And it costed us almost $15,000 just to get a lawyer and then just to get the paperwork and just to be recognized legally as a co-op. And that doesn't even consider the year over year of having to register and paying into that and paying taxes because of our corporate structure. So we instead um, went with a partnership LLC for Soft Now Week. And then we basically do our taxes individually. We have a CFO hub, which helps us with our financials and accounting related stuff. Just shout out to Future Club. and the wonderful folks over there who looked us up with the recommendation. But yeah, there's trying to open up a co-op and being like, our corporate structure is a co-op is really, really expensive, but it's not really necessary for running your own project or studio as a co-op. Because the second half of this is running the studio ethically as a co-op, which I would say is going to be a requirement regardless of whether you set up your business structure in that way or not. And the way that we approached this was by writing bylaws and sitting down and collaborating on like what is the law of Soft Now Week in regards to not just how we work, but also how we handle disputes, some of our expectations for becoming a member, XYZ. And we try to make sure this document stays somewhat relevant to where we are as a studio because things change. It's video games, you know how it is. It's very unpredictable. So I think the greatest thing that we try to lean into, especially when we write our bylaws, is to be flexible. But I see someone else typing, so I will wait.
Oh, sorry. I know you continue typing. I'll just ask it. When would you so, in terms of you can operate like a co-op, obviously, without actually registering as one, but it's I guess it's like a kind of like a more less legally
Mhm.
like if something goes wrong, people want to be like, you owe me this,
Yeah,
I guess it's
yeah.
different. When would you recommend going from like a cheapo LLC that operates like a co-op to a fully recognized co-op? I'm sure there's like a point because it's like, yeah, it's 10 to 15,000. There's probably a decision point where it's like, okay, now we should be like for real about
Absolutely.
it.
So if I'm remembering correctly from like and with our accountants, essentially like if your partnership LLC starts to become like more than 5 to 6 people, then they kind of suggest shifting into a different corporate structure. Depending on what your funds are, you can shift into a co-op legal structure if you've got the funds for it. And by that time, I imagine you would be able to like afford shifting into that legal structure, but you have to go through a very specific lawyer and very specific paperwork unless if your passion is paperwork and handling the legalese and navigating then absolutely. But I would say once you get to like 5 or 6 members, that's when um a change in corporate structure would start to kind of become more valuable, and that's really just for the boring part of like taxes. So, like, we can keep adding members to our partnership LLC, but what does it mean if, like, how do I put this? I'm going to do math really badly, real quick. Like, once you get to like 6 members, then you're basically splitting the company apart by 16.66%. And it's like this becomes unfeasible, right? Like the more people we add, the smaller this percentage gets, and because of the whole cost of living and what people's needs are, especially from a membership perspective, and wanting to set folks up for success, you kind of want to change how that happens once you reach that like 20. Once you reach like okay, we're at 20%, which would be 5 members on a partnership LLC. Starting to consider that from a financial standpoint would be the right move. And kind of to think about how my homies over at Co-op with a K would handle this is there is something written into their bylaws. Don't quote me on this. I'm mostly speculating because I haven't seen it myself. But if I understand it correctly, there is kind of like a giant account that exists to pay out members. Um, and this is when it becomes a little bit more corporate, where it's like, okay, based on your role and what your needs and your impact on the team is, what is your salary, right? And once you start figuring out like, oh, what are people's needs based on where they live and where they are, it's still you're still splitting the money in a way because it's all going into a global pot that then becomes like a guaranteed like here's where the money comes from, but really that's not the reason you set up a co-op, right? Like you set up a co-op so that way folks can have the agency to change the way a studio works if it's not meeting the active needs of the people performing the labor. Um, so that's kind of like what's more important about becoming a member, less about like, oh my God, I get to get paid, versus being able to have the agency to change the place that you work in. I see we have a question from Zoe. What's the process of getting the system off the ground? I'm assuming at Softening we got various grants somehow. This depends. I would say you could start that process today if you wanted to. I have my own studio that I run for like freelance work called Maxim Crash that I do all my contract work through when I get around to that. But ultimately, like I went on Stripe Atlas, they have a whole thing you can set up a sole proprietor LLC or partnership LLC. I'm gonna say it cost me around 200, maybe $300 at most to get that all set up. They set you up with a Delaware-based address and advisor out there, and then it's actually surprisingly really straightforward. I love using it because it means that when I move, especially when I had to move from Massachusetts to Washington, I didn't have to do the whole dance with taxes and where the company is based. And this is just like a Delaware related thing, but Stripe Atlas. Let me link this real quick. Because this really ties into just incorporating. Oh hell yeah, fellow Masso, let's go, Kay. Um, but when it comes to the second part of your question, I would absolutely say for us, we originally had a co-development partner that we moved away from the Kickstarter, but the goal was always to be crowdfunded to some extent. Um, there was definitely grants in the work, so we got a couple of grants. One that we got from Humble Bundle, one that we got from goodness, I can't believe I'm blanking because it's been so long. But we also got a development partnership grant with Xbox, which I can talk a little bit about because I know there's a lot of like gray areas, especially with me being an employee over at Undead Labs and how I navigated that, which can absolutely get y'all into. Um, but hopefully that answers your question. A lot of it was really just working multiple jobs and then putting a certain amount of cash out of our own pockets into an account every time we got paid. So it was kind of like we were just all working multiple jobs. Taxes were insane until we got an accountant. So that's like if you're gonna have a studio, please get yourself an accountant that you trust, specifically one that is in the state that your corporation is being run in. If it's in Delaware, you can do it from wherever. Um, but it's actually surprisingly straightforward. When you do a partnership LLC, I can't speak from the co-op because we're not running a legal entity co-op, but partnership LLC, the company exists as its own entity. So the taxes for that are handled. And then based on the contributions, which are tracked through the one bank account that we all use for the company, we send that to our accountant. They basically run through that and then they combine all of our contribution expenses for the year individually. And each member essentially gets a 1099 from the company. So it sounds weird, but I get a 1099 from my own company. Especially with it being a partnership LLC. So when I do my taxes, it's scary at first until like you do it the first time around. But that's why I'm glad that we can hire professionals that can do the smart work and thinking for me. Because I am not a tax professional. So yeah, if we don't have any other questions, I can continue yapping and slide into kind of what it meant for us to be a co-op from a game development standpoint and how that impacted our processes. For context, we worked on a game called Spirit Swap Lo-Fi Beats Smash 3-2. My addition to the team came a little bit later. There were three original members I mentioned earlier. They founded the company, and then me and my other business partner, Jenny, we were both hired as contractors initially. She was hired as a producer. I was hired as lead UI UX. And then just through our contributions and collaborations with the team, we were both essentially invited to join the company as members. And this was great because we both believed in the project and we're like, yeah, we're here for the long haul. The other thing to just consider though is that was also a decision between are we okay with not getting paid hourly for our work right now versus the promise of pay later. We were okay with it because we all had pretty good jobs and we weren't putting all our eggs in a basket with trying to tie our passion directly with our means to live. So really we were like, okay, this is a great opportunity to be able to build something with some people that we really like. Let's do it. And that's exactly what we did. Through our payment structure and the way that we collect with our contractors. They all get paid in a very similar way. There's like a statement of work. Here's clear plan on exactly what this person needs to deliver. That gets signed by us or our creative director, and then also signed by the person performing that work. The work gets performed, we sign off on it, we put it in the game, and we see if there's more work needed for this person. Or if there's not, we say, okay, well, that's all we've got for now, but we'll be in touch as soon as we need more. And that's really just like based on the fact that realistically, there's only 4 internal people working on this game at all times. This is kind of tied into our ethos of being a co-op where we don't want to take advantage of our saying we're a co-op and then we're a co-op mostly comprised of contractors, because then that's not a co-op. Right, like that means the people actually still not members um of your cooperative, and ideally you would set up the pathway for them to do that, but setting up those pathways can be difficult, especially when it comes to the priorities of not only just running a business but also needing to build an entire game that determines whether you have a business or not. So there's a lot of like case by case basis stuff here, really just like taking observations and where you are and plan and prioritize for, and then ideally just setting up pathways of success for not only yourself or the studio, but also for the people that work on the game. Um, and that really just comes down to like asking people raw, like, what do you hope to get out of this experience, right? Like, what do you hope to get out of your time working with us? Because, like, if this is like, oh, I would love to work on something that matters to me, then cool. Or if I would like to work on something that helps me build up my portfolio, cool. Or I would love to work on this so I could get experience doing this, cool, right? Like the key word here is honesty. And all the work we can do. And ideally, we're able to do that with people that are also being honest with us, which isn't always the case. But people do their best. And ideally, the goal is to just be as good as you possibly can be, regardless of whatever the situation is. Um, However, throughout the development, and kind of leading into somewhat of what Zoe asked previously, we started off with a loan from our co-development partner, and the goal was to immediately get to Kickstarter as soon as possible. Because we wanted to be crowdfunded, we wanted to be funded by our community, and the reason crowdfunding is great from a publisher and also people taking you seriously angle is because you can prove directly that you have every single person that backs your Kickstarter is a sale, even though your game's not out. It's a pre-sale. It's a sale. You can prove if your Kickstarter is successful and you have the numbers to prove how many people backed you up, not even the amount you raised, the number of people that backed your project. That shows to publishers and whoever else who wants to collaborate with you and will give you grants that, oh yeah, your project is serious. Okay. Right. Like this isn't just you on Twitter being like, I have a great idea, and then you're tweeting out great ideas, or the X or whatever, Blue Sky. Like this is a real deal Holyfield project. You are serious about doing this, and you have the existing audience to do it as well. An important thing to note for us is that we decided very early on that we will not be working with a publisher for this first project. The reasons for that is, well, one, we wanted to make sure that we owned everything on the project, the IP, the distribution rights, whatever country, etc. Right? Like we were happy to front that, and that's mostly just through my experience doing it for my own studio, putting out my own games by myself for all these years, but also just because like my team members have also had experience on the publishing and distribution side, so we could cover the bases of whoever they wanted to get in and talk to us about whatever they wanted to do. And also just because of the timing, the deals that publishers are giving, especially today, do not add up with the amount of labor that is already performed by a studio. So if I'm in the middle of a project, I've already spent the money, I've already performed the labor, and you're like, oh my God, this looks like a great idea. We would love to fund your game, this, that, and the third. And then they want to start talking about, yeah, we'll do a 30-70 split. I'm like, no, I'm not giving you 30%. I don't even want to give you 20% because we already did the work. So, just make sure that if anybody approaches you with, oh my God, we want to give you money and we want to right? Like that, you have to really consider not just, but also like, is this collaboration just for this game, or are these people trying to get me to the next one? Simon, I saw you unmuted. Is there anything you want to ask?
Oh no, I just wanted to add, like, seconding that about, like, especially indie publishers for like indie games. They're all like legit insane and unreliable, right?
Mhm.
It's like I think this is from the perspective of um I think two things. One of them being like, my brother used to be an executive producer at an indie publisher,
Mm,
and where I'm working at right now, it's like a multimedia place that works with a lot of indie publishers also.
mhm.
And basically the common thread is like, yeah, the sort of owners and like the leadership of all indie publishers, it just seems to like be a bunch of like insane rich people,
Absolutely.
right? That do stuff on a whim, and so it's very much like, for something I think ethical and sustainable like a co-op, it's just like going through an indie publisher is like I don't think there's a good one out there that is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
yeah, so just I'm just seconding that.
Absolutely, and thank you. Like it runs almost antithetical to the whole purpose of the studio that you want to run. Especially, you know what I'm saying? So, I can't speak on Big Mode Zoe because I've never worked with Donkey, but I think, yeah, I'll put it on the record because I ain't scared of nobody. Like there are a lot of publishers that people who are just starting publishers for the sake of starting publishers. I don't know exactly what that team's core purpose of publishing is because I looked at their page and they say a lot of the same things that just say we're here to make good games and put that out to the world. And it's like, brother, that's what we're all here to do. So it's really hard to like identify what those beyond like having somebody with incredibly massive marketing power. And that's the biggest thing that you really get from working with a publisher is who's their audience. And Devolver is a great example of this. And I kind of have a little bit of a beef with it because a lot of games that get published by Devolver, they don't they kind of lose their essence from the developers that made them. They're Devolver games now. Um, and that's really just tied to their form of marketing. So if you as a studio, if you wanted to work with a publisher, that's okay. Just make sure you're working with a publisher that is not only focused on supporting you for this game, but is interested in getting you to the next one. Because what you're really looking for is somebody that is wants to collaborate, right? Like if you see an opportunity for somebody to help you with localization, QA, and a whole bunch of other stuff, and that ends up lining up really nicely with the way that you want to work, fantastic. But the problem with these kind of collaborations, especially in the publisher space, is that they now they determine your timeline. Now they tell you when the game's coming out. And I don't know about you, but that makes me itch. You know what I'm saying? Like me really not want to like I'm losing agency, but at what cost? And I'm not really interested in losing agency. I want to collaborate with people and collaborate with whoever and let that lift the tides of whatever we plan to do together. Let me read chat real quick. Like it seems possible that there has to be. Oh, absolutely. Like I would say a publisher that absolutely gives a is Wholesome Games. They started publishing certain games recently. Um, and I say this mostly because I know some homies over there, but you know, those are people that care. Um, trying to think who else. There's definitely people out there that care. The problem is more so that like the circumstances and the timing and how much money they got and what they can promise, it might not always line up. There are good people everywhere, even at horrible fucking places. So it's really just a matter of who you get to link up with. I think it's more about the people than it is the company, but also the contract. Um, so hopefully that answers that question. Let me see. I would be worried just because his first game published was already, yeah, yeah. The big mode is it, and also we're talking about video game down, a very, very, very popular video game YouTuber, right? Like the greatest strength there in regards to a publisher, especially if there's going to be a collaboration, and especially if they're going to be taking your profit and checking your pockets, is in regards to their marketing. However, as has been proven thus far, for a lot of games, paying for that marketing is not always worth it. Like I'm thinking about the most recent game, what's it called? Mouse Maze, maybe. Uh, Game. It's called Maze Mice. The person who developed that game put out a blog recently about to make their game, and they mentioned that they paid, I believe, somewhere between 10 to 15,000 just for marketing. And they said that it wasn't worth it, and it ended up working out through word of mouth. Like word of mouth is the strongest marketing. So regardless, whatever publisher will tell you they can do it, they can't actually guarantee you any numbers. Social media, as we know it, is in direct competition with games, so it's really difficult to really see how putting 15K into marketing and getting things up on Reddit and Twitter and everything would be less valuable than hitting the ground running and trying to get people locally talking about your game naturally. Um, yeah, absolutely, Lucy. Marketing is absolutely a gamble. Oh goodness, yeah. I get it. I was in the mobile space too. Like, yeah, yeah. There's just so much money that goes into just trying to catch somebody's attention that it can sometimes, if not always, detract from trying to get people to play your game. So yeah, it's one of those. Hopefully, you're working with a publisher that games, but that's publishing. There's other ways to get money, like grants, as I mentioned, like Humble Bundle and certain studios, like let me see, I'm trying to think of their name, maybe Dragnet and Friends. Um, certain indie studios, or even the homies, Inner Sloth. They have like the Outer Sloth Fund, where they also started sort of kind of like publishing games in a way. Where they'll put out grants sometimes just to fund games that they care about, because they love the art and they love the craft, and I love when the homies just show up to do that. Like that's giving it back in a way that we would hope to see, but also uh massive indie successes becoming publishers is a kind of predictable trend in regards to the evolution of stage capitalism. Not really a hit at my friends or anything. They were trying to do the best with a hard situation. But it's also like the pathway. I could leave a whole text about it because I've read it. About like there's a paper published about indie devs or larger YouTubers, like Markiplier, for example, make a movie about Iron Lung, coming into the space and then funding that and what that looks like from end stage capitalism's system. So, sorry, I know this is about co-ops, but this officially turned into the indie space and end stage capitalism. So we're gonna have some fun here, gang. Um, but yeah, no, ultimately we worked on a project. The original plan was for it to be a 2-year development that turned into a 4.5-year development. The team's about to put out a massive update next month, like I think like in 2 weeks. I've been on hiatus ever since we launched in February for my personal health and to get my life together. And also everything going on with Microsoft and Undead, as you all know. But beyond that, we decided on our primary funding being Kickstarter and being crowdfunded because we wanted to make a game for our community, funded by our community. This is really more so tied to our ethos, but also it worked in our favor in regards to showing publishers like, yeah, we're serious, but also show to people who give out grants that yes, we're serious. And it's really I'm just so grateful. Like everybody showed up. Yeah, like everybody showed up for us for our Kickstarter. People that surprised us, and people from my hood, my mother, gave money for it. My mother's broke. People from my hood who were hungry showed up and gave money. You know what I'm saying? And this is the whole point, right? Like, so, when people showed up and, even $1, $5, regardless of that amount, that just means the world to me, and especially the other folks on the team. And we ended up not only hitting our goal, we ended up doubling it. We started, and that's something that is really important to mention in regards to crowdfunding. Do not put your game up and ask for 20K. if your game is going to cost 60K. The reason for this is because if your Kickstarter is successful at 20K and that's all you get, you have to now ship that with less funds than you need. Um, which kind of it's a foot gun moment of like, okay, we just want to succeed on the Kickstarter, and we actually have. I remember, I'm not gonna trying to be professional. But there was a gentleman who mentioned to us that we should lower our goal from 75 to 20 because of how niche our game is and that we didn't have the audience. We said, okay, no, we're not going with that advice because it would set us up for disaster. If we hit that goal, which we would hit 20K based on our existing networks and our community, then we still have to ship with way less than we actually need to finish this game. And come to find out, even doubling our goal wasn't enough because life continued to get more expensive. This ties into the whole inflation bit where we predicted the game to take 2 years. Life happened, everything in Gaza happened, and we're making it basically about Lebanon. And it's like, the reality of the world, circumstances really impacted our ability to develop this game and to have the people that some of our contractors that are living in these areas that are no longer safe and that can't really focus on this and now need extra money to be able to help their families and pay for food. So it's a lot of like the reality of the world is going to continue to happen while you develop your game. So make sure you set up your number on Kickstarter for success. Let's see if we've got a question. How did you figure out the 75K crowdfunding goal was what you needed? So because we had our whole $40 an hour budget, we talked to every single person that we with and we asked them ahead of time. We planned out the whole project, or at least we tried to. And we said, okay, based on the contractors and what we got to pay for, here's what's left. And that number was somewhere around 70K. I would say 75K. And then also that's like this would pay for everything. However, we had some grandiose goal scope changes and some people were around, some people weren't. But in the grand scheme of that number, we landed there from just budgeting. Like thankfully before we did any of the crowdfunding, there was about 8 months of us developing prototypes of the game to identify any hard stops, what we needed, what we didn't need, what was realistic for the team, and then also just if we're paying everybody $40 an hour, what is that? What does that mean in regards to making sure that we can pay everybody that same amount for the rest of the project for 2 years, still pay our taxes, identify what our company costs are for the year, and we got to pay for fonts, we got to pay for music, we got to pay for animation, pay for art, and then we have to pay for Unity Pro 2 or 3 seats. We have to pay for the licenses and boring parts of running a company, but they're necessary for us to get our job done, especially like paying for Asana and different software. 75K estimate for 2 years. And essentially that was paying for all of the content. So that was ignoring paying ourselves, right? Like that 75K was just for contractors. None of all of the money for the Kickstarter went to paying for the contractors or paying for like seats of Unity Pro. Actually, big shout out to Fergus and all the people at Unity who supported us. They ended up giving us some free seats for about a year or two. But yeah, no. It really just like I'm trying to think of what I had to that point. Yeah, 75K estimate for paying contractors for the work that we had left based on content that we planned for 2 years. It wasn't really a timing of like 75K for 2 years. It was really more like 75K for this content that we absolutely need. And that was just like an estimate on hours, but sometimes some people took longer, sometimes some people took shorter. So that number moved around a lot. Come to find out because it's video games and life happens. Even though we doubled our goal, I believe we hit 165 or 175K. We still individually on a project, I would say we probably put in a total combined with the Kickstarter of somewhere around 300 to 400K. And that number really just came from video game development, certain things just not really taking as long as we expected, cost of living going up, um, cost of seats and software going up, helping out people where they needed, some people needing more, some people like certain work that we paid for that didn't ended up in the game, certain work that we paid for that just didn't meet our expectations. So there's a lot of like the biggest lesson out of that in regards to budgeting is budgeting for work that we won't be able to use. And there's a lot of like consideration for like, okay, well, we're still going to pay these people, they still perform the labor, but we're still going to have to eat that in some way. So we ended up paying a lot more into paying for the game, and I'm thankful to my members for coming together because I had to for myself, I filled in certain gaps. So like I'm a graphic designer site. We have a composer, Melty Cannon, but this is his first time composing music for a game. I've composed music for games. So I'm lead audio. I'm lead UI UX. I'm also co-technical director. So it's like how indie is, just covering our bases and putting out fires where necessary. Um, Absolutely. Thank you for joining us, Zoe. And I'm here to stick around and answer questions because I can, yeah. But otherwise, yeah, it's really just like whatever number you think you have, double it, maybe even triple it. Just because it's hard to predict how much more life will be expensive in the future years. Like anything can happen. Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to cover. Yes. So that's getting to the Kickstarter. So we succeeded on our Kickstarter. Now comes the hard part. Now we got to finish the game. And there was a little bit of like a certain amount of like I would say, especially when it came to running a co-op and developing this game, of us like whenever there was a dispute or something occurred or needed business to be like agreed upon, we always made sure that every single member said yes. And at the time, I was living in Massachusetts, while the other members were in Washington and Oregon. So we're in different time zones. And because of that, that means I would go to bed sometimes to having to solve problems in the morning that occurred during the night. Um, a lot of this is really just it lives or dies on your ability to communicate and to be patient on waiting for the right people to be around because if you're going to open up and you're going to run a co-op remotely with people that are not in the same time zone, um, I would highly, highly consider what that means for how you run communications and run collaborating with people that may not even be up when you're up. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're working with somebody in Europe or you're working with somebody in Africa, basically in tomorrow. So like figuring out how you would want to handle that from a studio perspective is just as important as writing your bylaws as a co-op. Um, so yeah, the rest of the game happened. We developed it, had some challenges. Life and world happened. And essentially we launched. We successfully launched in February. We had to cut a lot of things from the game that we want kind of focused on right now. We have a free update coming out in a few weeks that just adds a lot more to the end of the game and a couple extra modes. But ultimately our plan was to launch on PC, Mac, Linux, um, and everything else was a bonus. So working with Xbox was a unique situation, and that's going to be a great segue because I was working on Spirit Swap before I joined up, and part of my interview process, I was honest. I was like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm working on this game right now. It has nothing to do with what you're doing, but I'm not going to stop working on this game, regardless of whether you like it or not." And is that going to be a problem? Like, is there a conflict of interest here? They said, no. As long as you don't work on an open world, AAA MMO, soft MMO, zombie survival game, we're cool. I said, easy, because that's what I'm here to do. So that it was more like there weren't any documents signed. Like I think is important to mention. Yeah, like I didn't sign anything getting the okay. It was a communication of like, yes, this is cool. I communicated with everybody and communicated audience. It was no surprise. There was nothing to hide. There was only certain things I could not do. Um, absolutely, Lucy. Like their moonlighting policy is super unstructured. In my favor, right? So compared to like other studios, Nintendo, where like I did an interview, I had an opportunity to go work with them, and I chose not to because of their. It's like, oh, everything you work on will belong to us. Everything you work on, if you sneeze at night, that'll probably really belong to us. Being funny, but also not dramatic. Um, where I'm like, oh, I'm going to be continue to be creative and continue to want to make art because that is just tied into what I do, and that is a no go for me, right? Like I'm not working anywhere that does not allow me to continue to be creative time, and ain't nobody gonna tell me what I can and can't on my own hours. So yeah, that's why Undead Labs, that was my first AAA studio. It's just happened to be the first place that lined up with everything that I cared about and all the wonderful and smart people that I get to work with on a day-to-day basis, but also the moonlighting policy leaning in my favor for all the business that I was running, both from my own studio, Maximum Crash, for freelance work, but also with Soft Not Weak from a co-op perspective, really worked out in my favor. So it's a lot of just like I got really lucky on where I was. But yeah, let's see. Simone says EA wouldn't let you stream, let you sell models on Sketchfab or whatever. You couldn't even put out a game for free. If you made a game at home, you could only show it to immediate family. It was insane. I believe that. You are not the first person to share EA's policy. 1000% correct. It's just really unfortunate that a lot of these studios believe that they have ownership over, like, we are not people, we are assets. And anything we think, breathe, or make is an asset that belongs to them. Like they see us more as like profit ventures to cast off in regards to whatever they want to do, and that is not a system that I'm interested in working in or people that I'm interested in collaborating with. Um, so yeah, if you're wanting to run your own studio and make your own art, especially at night, like that also ties into the kind of like career lifestyle that you have, where whatever day job you choose to pay the bills and keep the lights on, kind of has to also be in support of that, which makes, fortunately, and especially in the tech industry, finding a job really hard. Because a lot of these places are like, yeah, you wrote a note that says hello. Yeah, that's nice. That belongs to us now, right? And it's like, nah, it's unrealistic. It's inhumane, and it just don't make no damn sense. Um, but when it came to talking about the gaming studio, that was a no-no. That was like a conflict of interest because, and I respected that, right? Like I'm not gonna work at a game studio and come in and start advertising. Hey, everybody, I'm working on this game. For me, from a professional standpoint, it just didn't really rub me the right way. So I was like, the people who know or need to know or would appreciate this game in any context, they know. And like, for example, Zoe reached out, was like, "Hey, can you post about this in random?" I was like, "I can't, but you can." You know what I'm saying? So, just shout out to all the homies who like supported the game and the project and were able to see themselves and enjoying it. Because in the grand scheme of things, like when it came to like getting the Xbox opportunity, they're actually super structured over there. We worked with the folks over at Idea Xbox. They're super freaking lovely. Like great people over at Idea Xbox. They really care, especially about like I would say compared to, you can put this on record in circa 1:03 p.m., 7:23:25, Rajon said, of all the like indie related side to the three major platforms out there, Idea Xbox is the best one right now. They care the most for as communicative as a large company are the best at communication, but also they had a great us in regards to like getting funding and making sure that we were supported and getting on Xbox and certain marketing efforts. Like we were in certain, I believe like the Idea Xbox like trailer run right after they do. I think that's during like the Xbox marketing week. That like a day for it. We were part of that. So it's like they really care about games and they really care about diverse games over there. And the fact that they showed up for us and supported us was massive. However, when you are like setting up that contract and setting up that collaboration with Xbox specifically, and you are an employee at Xbox, they ask, is anybody on your team or internal to your company currently a employee of Microsoft? Yes, hello, sorry, it's me. Currently an employee. Um, and you just have to answer them. And what ends up happening that I learned from the people at Idea Xbox, them at GDC about a year or two ago, is because it's funny. Like I met the person, like, oh, you're a rage. Yeah, I know you. We had to go talk to some people about you, and they were just joking. But realistically speaking, they have to go talk to your studio head. So because I was honest and upfront, and basically said it with my whole chest, I'm working on this game with you. Everybody at the chain at Philip knew that I was working on this game. So when Idea Xbox had to go do the hey, are you okay with this check? They went to Philip and said, hey, are you Z? And he's like, yeah, no problem. That's cool. So Philip gave me the okay to Idea Xbox for us to get to get the grant and get the funding and to get published by Xbox. So shout out to Philip for that. But otherwise, like that is just a unique scenario where like I can't really speak to the other studios. I can't speak to what their policies would be. I can't even speak to Xbox internally itself and what that would look like. Like it sounds like because they are asking checking like in regards to this whole process and form of getting set up with funding from a grant from Idea Xbox or publishing through Idea Xbox. Because they have that like checkbox, like, yeah, this person is employed at Xbox. It sounds like there's a process through Microsoft to get that figured out. And it comes down to whoever your direct studio head or studio lead, or I can't speak to the other places in Xbox, but it comes down to that person at the top of your chain to determine that. We have something mentioned from Suman. At my new company, which is a small multimedia play, since I opted to be a W-2 employee instead of a 1099 contract, they did have me sign a confidential information and inventions assignment agreement thingy that's kind of like that. But when I talked to the CEO, he was like, oh no, we're fine with you working on your stuff outside of work and won't take ownership. This was CIIAA that we adopted due to X incident, and I got permission to work on my project and keep on of them over email to be certain. That's awesome. I just learned something new. Right, like I have never been in the position that I've been in, especially at Undead. So it's good to know that something like that exists because you're totally right, right? Like companies will do these things for reasons, for things that they've been through from a legal perspective. And if I put my business hat on, I can understand that. But I'm also like, come on, keep it simple. We have a question from Kay. What is the plan, and are there any safety nets if the co-op fails financially or otherwise? Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question. There is no plan. The plan, realistically, at least right now, is that we hiatus and try to keep the company afloat with as little funds as possible. That would most likely just be paying our accountant for the year, doing our taxes for the year, and then if we get any profits, especially since we have a product out and gaining money over time, then we're good to go. But if it fails or falls apart, you would essentially shut it down like you would any other company. There would have to be essentially an agreement on how existing products that are continuing to gain profit, are we keeping them up? Are we putting them down? Is there an account that we pay out like quarterly to people that worked on the project? You just sign a very specific document to set that all up for the closure of your company. But financially, safety net wise, like it's kind of what I'm already doing right now, which is just working a day job. So this is like the and sustainable truth of indie, especially like without being popular or superstar or having like tons of money or being rich already. Like you kind of have to live through sustainable means for yourself first, right? Like, please do not start a studio if like there are higher priorities in your life, like health or financial or mental. health as well, right? Like you come first always. Like the only reward for good work is more work. So the studio and your passion and your idea thing will be further informed as we get older. But ultimately, this isn't like a don't start a studio because things are bad, right? Like this is more so like if you're going to start a studio, make sure you have the right reasons to start a studio with this business information that I'm sharing with y'all today. Like if I was to think about it and going looking back 4 or 5 years ago, I do think starting the business was the right idea, and precisely for two reasons. One was just because we needed an account for money that wasn't just one person having we needed an account just for the business. So that way there wasn't any confusion over money. Every single member of the co-op has access to that account. The second is in regards to collaborating with people like Xbox or Nintendo, Sony for whatever reason. These people will not work with you sole proprietor, period. The reason for that is mostly from a legal perspective, still making software that can essentially people's computers and hardware and things that they pay for, or cause certain medical conditions like seizures, accessibility issues that come up from playing video games for an extended period of time. Thus, we are responsible for our users. And in regards to the legality of that, if you get sued as an individual, it can, because we have this unique thing in America where businesses exist as entities. Um, if your entity is the one that published that product or game or software, then the person that gets sued is not you, but the company. So the company's assets. That does so if you buy a car as an individual, that's not the company's car, that's your car. But if the company buys the car and it belongs to the company, like the company has for it, then that belongs to the company. So if the company gets sued, but you have your own car under your name, so it's more so like you should establish a business entity really for 2 to 3 reasons. One, to protect yourself. Second is so that way it's easier for you to conduct business with corporations that are almost hundreds of years old. And the third is so that you don't, it's weird to put all your eggs in one basket, but essentially you are compartmentalizing business life and your personal life. You really don't want these two to mix for any direct reason. Let's see, we have a question in the chat. If you are also working a full-time job, people at the call work part-time, or all y'all doing 2 full times? That's a great question. So this kind of changed throughout the development of Spirit Swap. So not to put their business out there, but Alex, our creative director, initially started off where they had no jobs. They were working on Spirit Swap, um, which kind of ties into the whole cost of living need thing and also our need to rush towards Kickstarter. But what ended up ultimately happening is as a few years went by, they ended up gig over at Ivy Road working on Wander Stop with Davey and Ivy Road crew, great folks over there. Um, but what ends up boiling down to it is like it's on an individual level for what that person needs in their life. Like I can't determine what Alex or Morgan or Jenny may need in their stages of our life. And we all have different scenarios going on. Like my mom's disabled. I take care of my mom. I work really hard to make sure that I can send my mom money so she's not living in poverty. You know what I'm saying? So but they don't have that problem. But there are problems that they have that I don't have. So a lot of the circumstantial stuff is like I work multiple jobs because not just the life that I want, but also because of the problems that I have to solve on a day-to-day basis. So it's a little bit of both. At first, some members weren't working full time. Ideally, the goal is you're working full, right? But you need the funds and the sustainable income and the cash flow to do that. And the only way to do that is to make products to finish the game. But then comes the Ouroboros, you could say oxymoron paradox of trying to start a business. You need money to start a business, to run a business, but the only way to get money, realistically speaking, and sustainably without being some form of debt is to make a product. But to make a product, you need the money. So you kind of have to figure out the like fastest way of creating something that you care about, but also making sure that you can set up avenues of cash flow. So making a game, I would say, is the most expensive lottery ticket to try to print to create cash flow. There are many other ways to do this. We started off with a video game because we see Spirit Swap not as a sole product, but as a world and platform from which we then are able to create other means of products. So things like comics, cartoons, like we work with the Future Club folks to make the intro and outro of our trailer, merch, things like hats, shirts, creating worlds that people care about. Those are different avenues for cash flow that then essentially invest into making the thing that you do want to do, which is video games. Let me check chat. I heard being born rich to I heard being born to rich parents is a good way to get funded. You're so right. Funko Pops when? Well, we did put out the plushie. We have a Froggo plush from Makeshift. I have it somewhere. Yeah, it's I got it up there. But Simone, you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so I was trying to type it out, but I think I was being like this. Maybe yeah. I don't know if you already missed explaining this. I might have missed that. But you mentioned before you turn into a co-op, there's like a percentage where I guess there's a percentage deal. But then once you move to the co-op structure, the payment is you mentioned the 40 to potentially 80 depending on the circumstances of the person.
Mhm,
But it's everyone just being, and then once the project makes money,
mhm.
um is there that percentage deal where it's like certain members, like does everybody who was involved get like an additional percentage on top of their pay, or is just that like there's certain members that get the percentage and certain people who just got their 40 an hour payment?
No, it's a great question. So this depends on the circumstance and the position of your company at the time. For us, we were like, okay, the 40 to 80 hours is what we would pay our contractors, but we don't get paid at all. We'll get paid directly off of the profits of the game if the game profits at all. If it doesn't, we got to eat that. Um, but let's say you are a massive success and make a gajillion dollars. The way we would spread that out is, especially when you start growing the number of members and want to change the structure of your company. You My suggestion would be that you have a massive pot that the profit of your money goes into, and your members get paid depending on how much the company needs to run on a yearly basis, need, and the frequency in which they need that. This is when we start getting into talking about salaries. This isn't something I've done yet since I don't have a salary at Soft Now Week. But as I've seen it at other co, the way that they do this is based on a contribution and involvement and time length at the company, and it starts to get a little bit more. It starts to like stop reflecting a co-op from a financial perspective and start looking more like a regular company. But there is a promise of a bar that everybody gets placed at, and then that shifts based on their responsibility. Um, but to actually answer your question, because I'm rambling, there is going to come a point where you have to kind of change, like, oh, we're going to all get paid quarterly, we're going to get paid bi-weekly, and starting to determine your salary, but that's a case by case basis, and I am not a financial professional, so I can't really answer that in a complete way, but I'm starting to learn as I go. So if I find anything out, I'll let you. For that big pot split up, are y'all tracking the hours the whole time to figure that part out? We started off tracking hours, but then this is great about this project. Um, we started tracking hours, yes, but there came a point in which there was a, let's call it, an imbalance. So for somebody like me, my role in a project where I have 24 credits on Spirits Without the most credits on the team, which ultimately means that I'm working the most hours. The way that I offset this with the company is that my contribution throughout the project decreased. So it's either I'm doing less hours, but I'm putting more money to the project to keep us going, or I'm doing more hours and putting in less money to keep the project going, right? Like, in some point where I'm keeping the project, we're keeping the project going, um, one way or another. But we tried to balance out the responsibility based on like who's doing the most work. But when it came to like, okay, the game's out, we're starting to profit. Now it's time to start paying people, and we do the whole big split up pot thing. It gets a little gray and complicated because it's like, okay, well, who deserves money out of the pot? The people who put the money in, or or the people who did the labor. And instead of trying to get into the gray area of fighting on that, we decided to run this company equally and to respect each other. So we split that pot equally, regardless of how much anybody put in or regardless of labor or money. We just kept it simple. Oh, I see you're using AAA jobs. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. That is that's kind of how I've always like ran in indie. I kept at one job. Like always, always, always. Like the money has to come from somewhere, and it's either coming from my direct labor or it's coming from funding from grants or a publisher, or I'm rich already and I'm funding it myself out of my trust fund, which I'm not a trust fund. That's the part I didn't think about. The day job is not just, yeah, the day job also funds the company because where else is the money coming from? Like those are the only three ways that we were able to pull this off. Like we all had day jobs at Soft Now. We were all working a day job and then logging off and sliding right into it, which you know, we try to avoid crunch by any means necessary, but it is impossible with us working a day job. Like I'm working 13, 15, 16-hour days, and not having weekends to make sure that spirit swap gets done. And this is just a matter of circumstance because like otherwise I wouldn't be able to have the time to work at the job and get the money that I need to game. And then I also need the time to make the game. And this is hard to recommend. It really comes down to the kind of lifestyle that you want. And if making video games is your passion and something that you care about and are willing to give this much time, like I'm not even talking about money, I'm talking about like time and life and like health towards, that is absolutely a deciding factor in starting a studio. Not just like, oh, where am I going to get the money from, but also I'm about to give up my life for this, realistically speaking. Let's see. Stop posting. No. I guess we can slide right into questions. Like I've been yapping. We're on. If any other questions that y'all might have, that's kind of like everything. When it comes to talking about co-ops and other industry stuff. But I hope I helped in on my rambling today.
No, this was awesome. It's a lot of information to digest for sure. And as someone who hasn't even touched like trying to do indie stuff either, it's nice to hear about new options to think about.
Absolutely. Happy to help.
Yeah, no, I think yeah, seconding that, like that is awesome. I think originally when I switched careers to games, I was, I did like an accelerated masters, and then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and like my dream was indie, and then when I got the AAA paycheck, I'm like, well, I
Ooh,
need the
yeah.
money, and so yeah, so I kind
Yeah.
of like settled into that for a bit. And I think finally meeting this point, I remembered like actually this wasn't what I'm here for. I think
Mm,
it's like you spend so much time, and so I'm in like a happier place where it's like I don't have to go get a job.
yeah.
I ended up taking I'm saying that I did end up taking a job with a multimedia company only because it was stuff that was actually interesting to me, and
Mhm.
stuff more toward what I do, but it was ultimately also one of the key things that the only reason I also joined it was because they would let me continue working on side things and
Yeah.
yeah, doing things like that. Like I would just love to finally attempt indie,
Exactly.
yeah. So
Uh, to add to that, right? Like the freest person in this industry is the hobbyist. And that is
oh
what
yeah.
I am actively working every day. Like making video games and making art as a hobby. I would love to get paid for it every day. But if that means I gotta go do my little boring 9 to 5, that gets me through the day, and then I get to come home and do whatever the hell I want. I am significantly freer than most people that work directly in games, where they actually lose the agency to make what they want over time, especially as we get older.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think exactly that. I think I've realized I'm like I need to sort of get out of this kind of like nonstop, where at the end all I have to show for it is, stuff that wasn't even mine. So I think I 100%, I'm trying to get that freedom back now. I realize I don't have to,
Mhm,
be in that space anymore the way I was 10 years ago.
mhm,
And I think exactly like what you're saying, like working, and I think that the key thing also is that, finding a place that lets you work and doesn't try to take ownership of your other stuff, because, I think that was a thing back at EA. I started out on Madden, right? And it's just
mhm,
kind of the thing where it's like you got the yearly churn, and most of the people there did not care about Madden. They're like, I love working on Madden so I can go home and, play games I actually like and not care. And for me,
yeah,
I was like, that's weird. But also, it was one of those things where it's like that would almost work if the fact that they didn't have that, like, anti, like, you can't do anything game related outside of work or otherwise we own. Because it's like,
sure,
all right, cool. So then, this is just a terrible setup where I have to work on a game don't like and nothing else.
yeah.
So yeah.
No, 100%, 100%. And that's why like the added thing to that I would like touch point all of this discussion that we're having with is like the thing that I got out of Undead Labs is like the people. Like I'll keep it real, right? Like making a AAA open world zombie survival game, if you looked at my history, is not exactly something that I'm jumping at the chains for. But it's like I get to work with some of the smartest people in the industry and I learn so goddamn much from them. And I actually wake up on Monday looking forward to it. Like I love Pat and Tannis. Like they are the fucking best. You know what I'm saying? And like I visit these people, I have lunch with these people. Like these are people that I have to spend more time with than my own family sometimes. And I better fucking like these people. We better get along. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not here to spend time forcing something positive to happen. Let's make something. And if it's not working out, this is just not the right place for me. And sometimes that changes over time. So, the community and the people, those are forever. Like I said, like the only reward for like good work is more work, and there's always gonna be work to do. So I'm not really interested in doing the best job because I'm always gonna top the best that I try to do anyway. But no, just be good to yourselves, be good to each other because then when we leave this place, we carry each other. You know what I'm saying? Like we're not the time we spent is not invaluable. Um, so like I will remember all of you and all these people forever. You know what I'm saying? I carry that with me. And who knows? We might see each other at the airport and oh my god, yo, you know what I'm saying? Like and I think that's the value I get out of the places that I work, regardless of whatever I'm working on. It's the people because they make my day to day better, easier or harder, whatever, or weirder and stranger and like more exciting in unique ways. So yeah, no, that's me on my soapbox. Thanks for having me, gang. Thanks for listening.
Thanks
But
for presenting.
if you have any other questions, any other curiosity, like you got my line. I'm always like just at me because I get so many notifications that I turn my notifications off. So I usually miss messages. But please like reach out and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can.
Thank you so much. It was awesome.
Thank you. And with that, Kay, let me know when you got the recording up. I'll leave it to you to post it, but I appreciate your